Hi guys, welcome back to Schauer Thoughts. This is Sarah Schauer. This is a podcast for left and right brainers, middle brainers, anyone who thinks laterally, divergently, convergently. This is a podcast for you. So today we're going to be doing the final installment of How to Be More Creative, covering abstraction and improvisation at the same time. I'm going to do a little quick apology in advance. Abstraction, I will go off on a math tangent, but stay with me. I'll make it easy to digest, palatable, because I totally understand that math is not for everyone. I do actually have a sidebar that does relate to abstraction and improvisation on math, but just to get warmed up, how has my week been? Oop, just bumped the mic. It's been great. I had book club yesterday, and again, we're doing This Is What It Sounds Like, a legendary producer turned neuroscientist on the art of like finding yourself through music. And she goes through 7 different dimensions of listener profile. There's 3 aesthetic dimensions, and then there's 4 musical dimensions. The 3 aesthetic dimensions are binary. The 4 musical dimensions are not binary. It's basically the equivalent to fine motor skills versus gross. You need both working together to have, be in harmony and sync, right? And then get your understanding of, your individual identity at this current moment in time, because it's ever changing, much like music tastes. People are not static. We do change over time. Literally, figuratively, your body, your brain is always changing. So it's really cool. It's a really fun book. We are almost halfway through it, so the book club will be linked in my bio. You can join it, obviously. You can also just subscribe to the Patreon to watch the entire discussion points. Also, after each book club meeting, we do have an annotation session where I teach people how I annotate, and the first couple sessions are like teaching people how I annotate, and then the next couple sessions are teaching people how I study and how I remember stuff. It's really cool. And it's just been going really well. And what the author says in This Is What It Sounds Like is very much relevant to what I have to talk about today. I do love when an artist goes to the sciences, because to me that shows love, right? Also, the thing is the arts are things that are like total combinations of things. They're like results, right? Their expression, they are results. And so it honestly makes more sense to go from an art to a science, as if you're trying to solve for some things and you have the results, and then the sciences give you like some of the variables, you can kind of do some canceling out, reverse engineering, similar to it's like a hack, right? Not like a hack like someone who's a fraud, but I mean if you want to hack a system, usually you reverse engineer it. And so working backwards from the arts, which is always it's expression. There's also technique, and then you plug in the science. You can find some really interesting values out there and discover new stuff. Like a fun example of something was I went to Lectures on Tap a while back. It talked about the art and science of color design in cinema, and it was talking about the color red drawing in viewers, whereas the color blue pushes viewers away in a scene. And then I realized what they were describing is that red is the shortest wavelength, right? There's more of an immediacy to it, and then blue is the longest. So it's there's more distance to it. It goes the distance, and so it's just kind of fun when you think about how color is light, and there's science to it, but also it can be used for artistic expression, and it's just fun to work backwards in that way and combine. I will be getting interdisciplinary with this, because the thing is I have a long rant on the scientific method. Now, the scientific method is useful, but it's basically deductive reasoning, which goes from general to specific, and obviously there are benefits to that, but the downsides to going general to specific are, vagueness, and it's really not a lot of actionable steps, and the thing is actionable steps could be, actually is understood as applied, right? So it's you don't know how to apply it in what scenario. The results are a bit vague, and so there is a strong need for some interdisciplinary realms of study. And just to brush up on everything, when we discuss the neural correlates of, creativity, which involves divergent thinking, abstraction, improvisation, they're based on different novelty-based processes. And so they talked about the regulating role of dopamine, and this is so interesting because I get to bring in the book from book club. And so the thing is when it comes to novelty-based practices, that is in the realm of like an aesthetic dimension. Is it familiar or unfamiliar? Now, the thing is when it comes to your music preference, right? If you like genres of music that are more familiar, then that makes sense because the world is highly unpredictable, and it makes complete sense to have comfort music, right? Like you want music that is familiar to you. And so the more unfamiliar genres of music are going to be things that have kind of less predictability to it. And so on the farthest right of this curve that she's describing, when it comes to unpredictability and newness, there's going to be free jazz. Before free jazz, a little bit to the left of the curve is going to be just jazz, but free jazz is improv, right? It's musical improvisation. And so the thing is a lot of people don't like free jazz because it's hard to follow, and that is the essence of when you're coming up with something more on the spot. But so you really have to have an ear for jazz, and then, you want to push that boundary of like, you know what? I want to be surprised. I want to have to listen intently and follow along on this journey. And it's just really cool when we think about like novelty and newness, things that are novelty based are obviously new, fun, right? The emotion most associated with learning is surprise, and they were talking about the novelty, because the opposite side of novelty is risk, right? Like it's like, well, it's not opposite. It's like if you're more willing to try new things, you're more willing to go out on a limb, right? And so the thing is in a culture that polices the aesthetic dimensions of personal identity quite heavily, they are going to emphasize normalcy, right? So the aesthetic dimensions of identity are authenticity, expression, and appearance. And those are like things that they're aesthetic dimensions. So they're observable, right? And so the issue with the scientific method that I'm going to draw a parallel with is that they place so much emphasis on the observable, which makes sense sometimes, yes. Absolutely. However, the movement dimensions, they are not binary, and so there's a lot more variation. And if you don't account for those, like the gross motor foundational skills, you're just gonna be just imagine like me, like sitting completely still, and just all I can move is like my fingers, and I'm trying to like solve something or create something new with just my very like. My fine motor skills. Like there's not a lot of range and movement and expression, and it's not actually authentic to me if I have the ability to like move and express myself. So it's kind of a shame. I just also, sidebar, I glued on my eyelashes this morning, and I think I glued my eye. So now I'm crying out of my left eye. You know how it is. Anyway, this research article can only take us so far because it's actually kind of interesting. Their whole discussion of abstraction. I'll get into it. The actual math that they use in this entire paper is so revealing about the scientific process. Actually, let me just do this now. I know this is supposed to be the warm-up, but I think this is really interesting to point out. So on this, they're talking about like abstraction and like divergent thinking, novelty-based practices. They also talk about the basal ganglia and the cerebellum. And basal ganglia and the cerebellum are implicated in movement. They like, the sequence of steps, right? Like how you move, or like a certain, movement sort of things, and like awareness within the body. And when they do a little discussion of the math in this, they said designing a novel computational model of creative cognitive processes. They illustrated the proposed neural network architecture. And the thing is this is, when I say this is not to say that like all the things that I mentioned before are wrong. I'm saying exactly why they have a hard time studying creativity is shown in the math that they actually use. And it's very meta as they're talking about abstraction, and math is the most abstract thing. They talked about the neural substrates, including 4 brain areas modulated by the dopamine system and the sensory association cortex, which provides input. The 4 brain areas are the prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, basal ganglia, and cerebellum, which are involved in providing control, memory encoding, and novelty detection, respectively. Pathways are represented by black arrows and modulated by dopamine signals, blue arrows. The proposed neural network is modulated by dopamine, which can be segregated based on functional and structural organization into distinct pathways. This proposed computational model and its neural circuits account for 3 types of creativity. Sorry if this is like, if you're getting a bit lost in the sauce of the technical terms, but I'm going to point out that technical terms are not all that scary. They actually kind of I don't flub this as well. So 3 types of creativity: divergent thinking, abstraction, improvisation. The next step is to conduct simulation studies of this hypothetical model at the algorithmic level based on the suggested neural circuits to validate experimental findings related to these different types of creativity. As in the prior models listed in the research, the new model can use integrate and fire IAF neurons in simulation studies. The table 2 that they have presents the parameters used in a simplified IAF neural model, and the equation 1 shows the IAF neuron model. So what they have listed here, and I'm going to lose you guys, but stay with me, is dv over dt equals 1 over r. And then they have, the thing is I'm just actually going to sum this up. They use a very simplified version of this of what's being measured in the brain. So what they're doing is they just go and they, the description of IAF neuron parameters. They talked about membrane time constraint, resting potential, reset voltage, threshold voltage, initial membrane voltage, and time step. And then all they do at the end of it is calculate the change in frequency. And then they give like 2 little set ranges. Like they're like, so they have the firing rate of the first layer and the firing rate of the second layer. And so the thing is all they did was a first order separable ordinary differential equation, which is the first step in performing integration. That's all they did. So they're talking about thinking abstractly, which is, and then improving, which is reconfiguring, recombining certain systems and sets of information. And all they did was differentiate. They're like, these are different, right? The frequencies are different for these different things. And so it's like, yes. So what now? You have the sets. Are we going to reconfigure them? Are we going to make any strong stances? No. The next step is to integrate both sides, which they did not do. So I'm going to keep reading, though, and explain. In this learning rule, parameters A and B will be checked to find their optimal values for performing DT, abstraction, and improvisation. So optimal values like ability to do, not done. What... Okay. All of our simulations can be applied to the University of California Irvine's sentence data set, which has been used extensively in prior machine learning and neural network studies. Prospective research should first train the newly developed model to acquire a semantic network of several sentences to simulate DT. Here we will test how the model can activate loosely connected nodes, as in the case of creative people. We can stimulate the formation of abstraction as symbol-like concepts based on similar methods presented in another study. Importantly, using our proposed model, we'll test how the formation of abstract concepts can aid generalization. Crucially, future work can simulate creative motor sequencing using the previous models listed. Okay. So, crucially, future work can simulate creative motor sequencing using the previous models listed. So they just talked about the hippocampus, prefrontal cortex, right? But they also talked about the basal ganglia and the cerebellum, which are essential to motor sequencing, motor processes, awareness in the body. Are you telling me that you just arbitrarily split up because the thing is they're talking about divergent thinking, abstraction, improvisation as a purely cognitive process, which means thinking, all brain, right? However, the thing is when you include the basal ganglia and the cerebellum especially, you're talking about movement, and it regulates like all the way down the nervous system. It like plans sequences. You're telling me you included the basal ganglia and the cerebellum in this research on purely cognitive processes, and now you're going to make a part 2 on the creative states using our proposed model. You're talking about creative motor sequencing? Literally, that's what the basal ganglia and cerebellum are helping you do in this current moment. Are you telling me that you didn't factor them in? Because those are not pure. Are you just dividing parts of the brain? You're like, oh, it's purely a cognitive process because the basal ganglia and the cerebellum are attached to the brain, the central nervous system. Okay. What the fuck? You're telling me that you just okay. And okay, that doesn't make any sense why you would separate them arbitrarily when those two parts of the brain specifically are for motor processes. And now you're like, but we're going to do another thing about creative motor sequencing. Are you just going to, so in the next study, are you going to omit the basal ganglia and the cerebellum? Are you just going to include muscles? Are you going to be like incredibly literal about this? Because I mean, muscles do have memory, and I'm going to talk about a book that I have, but it's not memory in the way that it's like comparable to the cerebellum and the basal ganglia. I don't know what the hell you just did here. So the science is, it's interesting. Also, they did not account for, they did say that this is like a generalized equation. It's a simplified IAF neuron model, but I think IAF does RC currents. I don't think, the brain is not an RC current. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of like interesting things. Oh yeah, the IAF neuron model represents the total input current injected into the neuron. So I guess, but the thing is there's like actual action potentials and then ion membranes and stuff like that for like like salts and stuff. And so are you telling me that you just combined action potentials and ion? What? That doesn't make any sense. Okay. I'm just going to table that for right now. That the math is interesting. It's funny how they're talking about like ability to think abstractly, and then they stopped like a third of the way through the math, and then they just randomly, arbitrarily included motor. The thing that does the motor sequencing is going to be in another calculation. I don't know what's the point of that? Anyway, so I'm going to take over for abstraction and improvisation, and we're going to go through just the research that I think is good to emphasize. Then we're going to do some improv games or just breakdown of improv games. Actually, before we get into that, I do want to update my chemistry people. I have a bunch of books in front of me today. Also, I am getting so frustrated with a lot of neuroscience research. I love neuroscience, but I'm frustrated, right? It's mainly on the central nervous system, and almost everyone is discounting the peripheral nervous system. The nervous system is bidirectional. It's a two-way street. It's a hybrid AC/DC system with like oscillations based on like time and context. Like, so it's, anywho, I'm going to integrate information in a way that science is refusing to with some books that I'm going to share, which is lateral learning, and it's kind of, it is consistent with how I discussed weaving information together. If you didn't catch a lot of this, just know that the math on this was weird. Why would you do this? Why would you do this? But that's all I have to say. And so we're going to talk about my little lateral weave with learning now. Okay, chemists, get into this. So I'm approaching this from all angles, and I'm actually going to incorporate the peripheral nervous system, which, the peripheral nervous system and like biomechanics and like all this stuff and chemistry and chemoreceptors and all this. Yes, the chemistry of the body. This is a massive weave pattern for my brain. So just imagine like a really complicated Etsy pattern, and I'm following it. Well, I made this pattern, and so if you're like, can I have the pattern? because I know that people who sew always like ask for a pattern. Just feel free to get the gist of this pattern and go ahead and copy it. Pick up all the books if you'd like to. So just a explanation again, I study emotions predominantly. Every single emotion has a sensory component, and disgust is my favorite at the moment. She has two massive sensory components because there are two main types of disgust. We have moral disgust, which is linked to the nose, because the nose has more range, ability to make generalities. Like those type of people are bad, or, that sort of thing. And then there's visceral disgust, which is more associated with taste. Obviously, the taste and smell, the thing is all the nerves in the face. I understand that there's like a lot of crossover. Yes, I'm very much aware of that. That's why I'm doing a lateral learning. But so what we have here is scent, a natural history of fragrance, which is so much fun. And then we have plant lore and legend, the wisdom and wonder of plants and flowers revealed. And so then those scent is like approaching from. Both of those are approaching from like a ecology, sort of like nature perspective, obviously, because you want to know the lore of different scents. And then I have most delicious poison, the story of nature's toxins from spices to vices. And so this is poison is this mainly talking about things that are ingested. So scent, plant lore and legend. This is going to be like smell area with like, different types of like aromatic scents and the chemistry of those. And then most delicious poison, this is a biochemist. And so obviously this is going to go more the ingested or consumed via the mouth. Obviously he's going to talk about things that can touch your skin and like now you're like just a severe chemical burn. I understand. But so that's approaching from the ingested sort of angle, but also since he's talking about poison, and poison, it's disgust, but there's also a desire element, right? Because disgust can repel you away, but also if you ingest something that you like, it can draw you in, right? And so I have the botany of desire, a plant's eye view of the world, and it goes through the more pleasant aspects of desire, repulsion, desire, attraction, repulsion, So there's desire as sweetness, and then they talk about the apple and like the chemistry of an apple. I made a joke the other day on Instagram stories, and I've talked about research too long now that anytime I switch over to a joke, people are like, "Oh no, you fool!" I'm like, "No, I was making it funny. I was talking about being stoned, and I'm allergic to apples." And I was like, "Wouldn't it be funny if the reason I was allergic to apples is because there's cyanide in the seeds?" That'd be so funny if I had to tell people, "Oh no, dude, I'm allergic to cyanide." The joke being is cyanide is a poison. Like, it will kill anyone. So, like, oh, I'm really allergic to cyanide. Like, you guys are casually allergic. I'm really allergic. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's a poison. And so then it was a joke. I know it has to do with a certain type of allergen. Like, I think it's like a maple relationship going on. But everyone slid into my DMs and they're like, it's not a lot of cyanide. You don't eat the seeds. Like, it's perfectly safe I was making a joke. Thank you for explaining that. So we have the botany of desire as my more desirable, pleasurable, right? And then there's repulsion, and then there's smell. And so then now we're getting into the more brass tacks area, is the catalyst, RNA, and the quest to unlock life's deepest secrets. This is obviously talking about biochemistry and RNA and DNA. I have read this in the past, but at a certain point I gave up because the chemistry was too demanding. And now that I'm doing a full chemistry approach, I'm just going back in it. So I'm super excited. RNA and DNA. And then my incorporation with the peripheral nervous system, because it seems like every single neuroscientist studies central nervous system. And the peripheral nervous system, they're like, that doesn't matter. But again, bidirectional. As above, so below. So I have the mind-gut connection, how the hidden conversation with our bodies impacts our mood, our choices, and our overall health. Why this is important is because the rest and digest response. So the thing is I was talking about yesterday on my Instagram stories, like how to reparent yourself, and I was using electrical engineering sort of understanding. So when you want to bond with your parents growing up, but they don't want a connection, but you still want a genuine connection, there may be an improper fuse. And when you have an improper fuse, that could lead to, like really bad equipment damage. It could lead to like an electrical fire and all this sort of things. And when it comes to an electrical fire, your nervous system is an electrical system. When it comes to an electrical fire, do not put water on it ever. And so, especially if it's smaller, apply like a fire blanket or a weighted blanket to smother the fire. And so the thing is when you smother a fire, an electrical fire, you want to like decrease the oxygen. So how you apply that to yourself is putting a weighted blanket on yourself when you're experiencing panic or anxiety. Obviously, yes, run this by an electrician and your doctor. And so when I talked about that, because you want to smother the oxygen, a lot of people were like, oh, does that mean, choke yourself out with the blanket, decrease the oxygen in the system? And I was like, no. So you can take in atmospheric oxygen cutaneously, subcutaneously through your, it's from, cutaneously, which means through your skin. So when you apply even pressure and you smother the ability for oxygen to get in through the skin, it's not going to totally prevent it, but it will decrease the oxygen. So it will help dampen the heat of the fire and kind of decrease how the panic throughout the system. And so then the thing is also we have to consider the rest and digest response is that you have to be very acutely aware of what's happening in your stomach when you're having a panic attack, right? Because if you're feeling hot, like there's an electrical fire, one of the major sources of heat within your body is in your intestines. And so I know that they will use baking soda on electrical fires, right? Because it's an antacid. You can also take an antacid for a panic attack, right? Decrease the amount of acidity in your stomach, like that burbling, like that gurgling sort of burbling, especially if you lay down. I know that I've talked about this in the past, but sometimes I'll think I'm having really bad anxiety, but what I'm really having is GERD. And so it's good to test out an antacid. Again, I'm giving medical advice. Run this by a doctor, okay? But I was just making a sort of analogy with electrical systems. So that's the mind-gut connection. I haven't actually started this. I did read a book on the mind-gut connection in the past, but it was through the lens of pregnancy. And while that is illuminating, there was so many discussions of the baby that I was like, I mean, I know I could apply this, but like, I feel like there's, some adjusted sort of like nutritional levels. So I'm just going to, and I'm going to save it. So the mind-gut connection, which is peripheral nervous system, well, not the mind, but on muscle, the stuff that moves us and why it matters. So this is from a physical therapist, and it's incredible. Oh my God. Also, I've fallen in love. It's by Bonnie Sue. And she interviews this like female power lifter, and she like originally like broke records, and she talks about what it means to be strong and what muscle represents, and talking about like form and function and how the brain, like how movement is necessary to life. You don't have to, and again, when I talk about movement, I'm not talking about like full on sprinting or like, being Simone Biles, even though she is incredibly impressive. Just like movement, the less you move, then it's, yeah. And then I have The Beauty Molecule. It's written by Nicholas Perricone, MD, and I think this is Perricone Cosmetics. This is your skin is part of the peripheral nervous system. And what's interesting is that really when I was talking about issues with neuroscience in the past, and like the difference between like doing a reader when someone is lying down versus standing up. When you're lying down, touch sensors are incredibly active, like they're more heightened. And the thing is you don't have just touch sensors on your skin. It's also like in your intestines and stuff as well. So there's heightened sensitivity in a lot of places. So it's nice to get it a gastroenterologist, a dermatologist, a physical therapist to be like, all right, guys, the peripheral nervous system matters. I don't know how many times we have to fucking say this. Like, sure, it's not as glamorous, but anyway. And then I have a couple biochemists and then people who have a background in, biology and chemistry as well, but not biology, ecology. But yeah. I think next year I'm going to get into ecology because obviously I've gone through, last year was all sociology. All this year has been like STEM, particularly neuroscience. And I want to go to the next culture, which is nature. So next year is all going to be nature. Woo! Anywho, you're like, what does that have to do with abstraction and improv? Because the thing is abstraction, I'm thinking abstractly. I'm taking the indirect route around learning certain topics, because when you go like just straight into a textbook, the textbook is mainly like all technical terms, but you get more acquainted. It's easier to get acquainted with an area of study if you go applied terminology first. Like if someone is a science communicator or someone's talking about how this applies to you or how you could apply it to yourself, right, in a more functional everyday setting, then you become more familiar with the information. And then when you transition to the full-on technical knowledge, which I will be doing because I love a good textbook, everything is a lot less scary. You're like, all right, I recognize all of you. So again, it becomes more familiar, and the thing is once it becomes more familiar, there's more predictability. Like you don't feel as lost, because when things are too unfamiliar, too new all the time, you're like, this is overwhelming. And I did also recommend in the past a book on anxiety. The thing is before anxiety is arousal, right? An arousal state, right? It could be dopamine, it could be endorphins, all that sort of thing. But depending on what you specifically get aroused by, right? An arousal state, and like what neurotransmitters, neurochemicals are involved, it can branch off into anxiety if it's too hard, too stressful, too unpredictable. But then it also can branch off into excitement, right? Where a lot of people think that they're anxious and it's a bad thing. You might actually just be really, really excited. And I know that's genuinely confusing. Sometimes when I'm reading, I get so excited from reading, I throw up. And you're like, is that at that point? Is that? And it doesn't happen often anymore. It really happened at the beginning of the year. Maybe it's seasonal. Anyway, so let's get into. So what I'm trying to say is that I'm lateral learning, which is a side-to-side movement. And the thing is side-to-side movement is necessary for literally looking at things from different angles, right? Okay, so you can even think about it just purely in the realm of REM sleep, right? People who have like severe PTSD, that we do EMDR therapy, which is rapid eye movements from left to right, right? Because a lot of times we have a hard time entering REM sleep, and the thing is REM sleep, you're moving kind of like you're connecting unrelated parts of information, connections in the brain, and this is cranial nerve 4. It's like a pulley system. Like if you were to think of like a theater, like, you kind of pull the pulley and then pull it's going from left to right. That's pretty much one of the only movements, voluntary muscles that are still active when you sleep. And so like if you're have a hard time, looking left to right, which is in the peripherals, right, and you're doing some perceptual physics, you're kind of just locked on to things that are in front of you. And then you kind of, it's very hard to dissociate when you look up and to the right, up and to the left, down and to the left, down and to the right, because to move your eyes in those directions, you have to focus your eyes. So when you're just kind of staring blankly ahead is when you're more prone to dissociation. As when you go into the different corners of your peripherals, you have to focus. And it's just, there's, yes. Anywho, we're going to talk about abstraction. It's a basic construct. Okay, let me get this started. Abstraction is a basic construct in cognitive science that incorporates the following 6 senses: categorical knowledge, the behavioral ability to generalize across instances, so things that are analogous or similar, and, you get the gist of 2 things, and you're like, okay, these are similar in certain respects, they're analogous. That's why anytime I talk about science communication and someone's like, the metaphor, the simile, the analogy you gave is not an exact one-to-one. Well, yes, as I'm translating down several levels of abstraction, high concept, to make them more grounded in reality so everyone can apply them. Do you know how hard it is, damn near impossible, to do a one-to-one with mathematical terminology? Math is highly unambiguous, which means there's not a lot of variation. So there's not a lot of synonyms. So I do have to move it down a level of abstraction and get it more to applied terminology. There will be some wiggle room. It won't be exactly on the nose. However, you'll get the gist. Getting the gist is abstract thinking. If you need an exact one-to-one to understand it, you are actually struggling with abstract thinking. So please listen in. So then there's summary representations, schematic representations, flexible representations, wiggle room, right? Abstract concepts. This research article is highlighting abstraction as the formation of symbol-like categories of objects. Abstract thinking is also related to finding the sameness and differences among stimuli and objects in the environment. Finding sameness across different objects supports generalizations and creative processes, meaning abstraction may be related to divergent thinking. I would definitely agree. So finding sameness across, example, the sameness between a brick and a hammer, i.e. both are hard objects, suggests using a brick to hammer a nail. Okay? And so what I just said with no exact one-to-one, right, is a brick and a hammer the same thing. When I communicate, I'm saying I may be describing a brick, but I'm like, this is like a hammer. You can use it to pound in a nail, drive a point home, right? However, people commenting, oh, that's not an exact one-to-one. Yes, we are, we're not talking about things that are exactly the same. We're translating it to a different understanding of something to help people understand it more. Yes, so basically the gist behind a brick and a hammer in this context is that you can use it to drive in a nail or a point home. There we go. So this does also relate to bean soup theory on the internet. Oh my gosh, where someone will comment, can I use chicken broth instead of vegetable broth? Yes, that suggests lacking abstract thinking and also kind of implicates that you need permission to deviate, diverge from what was described. Now, I do want to add nuance to the bean soup theory. If you're like... if you're worried about certain chemical reactions and, you're like, well, actually, there's different sort of elements to that is a great, wonderful question. And I would love to research that with you. But I doubt that if someone is just proposing a recipe, it's very highly unlikely that they probably know the actual chemical composition. So that may be something that you kind of independently research for yourself. So at the neural level, abstract representations could be linked to the generalization function and novelty seeking of the hippocampus, which could be linked to the neural network of the hippocampus as one of the neural hubs of novelty ideation. So hippocampus is memory, right? We have space and time. And the thing is memory is like an impression. It's a shape of a certain event in space and time. So it's like this is another fun thing to bring in the arts, right? When a lot of people in cinema or film, they talk about when to cut a scene. Cut the scene when the actor blinks, because blinks are like your scene cuts. So when it talks about like taking in sort of like what defines a singular moment, the present, there are all these different studies. But also like if you just want to go by how your brain is cutting this film together, just go by your blinks. And now I know I've made you all acutely aware of your blinks. But in this article, because the article, now the math gets weird, and I'm like, I don't trust you anymore when it comes to actually abstraction and improv. Why I don't? Because they cannot actually use abstraction in the most literal sense, math right here, and they've arbitrarily divided the cerebellum and the basal ganglia. Those are both this is a purely cerebral process. No, it's not. They are in movement. Anyway, actually, let me do a little side tangent. This is related. The dominant culture has a very hard time thinking divergently, but also seeing the sameness across certain things. And I'm going to give an example. Now, I'm not saying that both of these things are not real. I am saying that they are real. However, they are the exact same thing if you look at what they are describing. Dyslexia and dyscalculia. So I'm going to go through this. Dyslexia starts to talk late. With dyscalculia, you start to count late. With dyslexia, you have difficulty with blending and segmenting sounds, and dyscalculia, difficulty with composing and decomposing numbers. Now, what both dyslexia and dyscalculia just described were motor movements, right? Talk, count. Blending, segmenting, they're verbs, right? Composing, decomposing. And if you think about motor sequencing, right, and how your brain splits apart words from melody or prosody, and I will get into that. Dyscalculia and dyslexia are essentially the same thing. So rhyme patterns are hard, number patterns are hard. With dyslexia, reads letter by letter or word by word slowly. With dyscalculia, counts tally marks or one by one slowly. Again, they are talking about pattern recognition, like certain, and then the thing is like rhyme patterns are hard, so they're talking about a sequence of patterns or anywho, number patterns. Dyslexia reads letter by letter or word by dyslexia forgets sight words, and dyscalculia forgets math facts. Dyslexia struggles with grammar. Dyscalculia struggles with algorithms. So grammar, algorithms, how to. So how is foundation is like gross motor skills. Why is fine motor skills, like your reason on top. They are talking about, again, everything that they're referencing is in reference to movement. And so then dyslexia copies letter out of order. So copies, again, they're writing. And then for dyscalculia, copies numbers out of order. And then dyslexia forgets, loses info for dates, names, addresses. And then for dyscalculia, forgets, loses info for logins, numbers, and deadlines. What those two share is that with dyslexia, your forgets or losing dates, names, or addresses, which tell you about a certain location in time. And then for dyscalculia, forgets logins, numbers, deadlines, right? Like certain, like information in time. Like what's the login for this website here, right? Did I use a previous login? And the thing is with dyslexia, they also what they mainly work with, like they do struggle a lot with like verb endings when it comes to past or present. Well, not present, but past or future, right? So they're talking about movement through time. Anywho, so I'm saying if you have dyslexia and you're like, but I don't have dyscalculia, I'm going to explain this. And if you are like, I have dyslexia, but I don't have dyscalculia. So again, like what I was talking about, with math being a language and how math is part of the sciences and language arts is part of the arts, right? With language arts, they are carrying the beacon for using first person and first person possessive. I, me, mine, making it relative to me, right? When it comes to math, everyone is always asking, where are we going to use this, right? And the thing is math is the universal language. And when it comes to identity, right, language is a huge thing that you identify with, right? Like I speak English, right? Like I'm an American, okay? But the thing is when people are saying, where are we going to use this? They're not identifying with math, as you rarely ever use the terms I, me, mine in math, right? It's not formal, right? It's considered informal. However, math is still a language. And if you cut out the I, me, mine, first person, singular of any language, there is going to be massive disconnects. And also, rarely anyone speaks formal math in any sort of context. And abstract concepts are things that are created socially. So if you do not engage with others socially in a purely symbolic math numerical way, then it'd be incredibly hard to pick up the concept, to grasp it, make it relative to you, to ground it in reality, to be something that applies, that you can use, right? And so, I keep bumping this mic. So I'm saying that there's language arts, math is a science. It makes sense that, that the school system is not kind to anyone. No, it's not. All right, let's go back to this. They included in this research, I absolutely love this, and I think everyone should read this immediately. It's called Lateral Thinking, a textbook of creativity. It is a textbook. You're like, I'm not doing that, and that's so valid. Let me give you a little brief rundown of the parts that stuck out to me, because we're going to be talking about, already talked about abstraction, right? We're reconfiguring sort of figures, and then improv is like yes-anding. You have to be completely immersed in the moment, right? A lot of people say, I'm not funny. I'm only funny when I'm with a friend. It's because you're flowing together, right? Ego is offline. If you're genuinely collaborating with someone, right? Like someone says something and you're like quick to respond and you're like, how come I'm only funny in that context? Because collaboration is a key part of improv. However, in a zero-sum capitalist society, they're competitors, right? So the fundamental rule of improv is yes and And for yes and, it's agreeing and adding on top of that. The thing is that's not a normal thing in today's day and age. There are so many contrarians where I could literally say the sky is blue and they're like, but actually, is it? No, but actually, if you think about it, so they are negating you. So they are stopping this, right? And no is a determiner, right? It kind of adds a boundary. And now there's like a wall around the conversation. The more you wall off the conversation, the less area you can turn to. If someone keeps saying no, well, actually, I don't think that. Or no, you're going to be like, well, damn, what can I do next? Everything I say is wrong. And so now you're not going to be able to riff with them. So why you're funny with friends, and the thing is you're still fucking funny if you're funny with friends, it's because you two are collaborating. Congratulations, you've momentarily stepped out of the system, took a deep breath of fresh air, played, enjoyed yourself, and then got sucked back into the vortex of capitalism. So yeah, we're going into lateral thinking, a textbook of creativity. And I'm just going to touch on all the fun parts, and then we're going to do a little improv thing. So I've already broken down, actually, the technical aspects. The thing is when it comes to creativity, you must apply it. You absolutely must apply it. Was it move it or lose it? Brain is like use it or lose it, right? If you are not being creative, it's going to start to be harder and harder. Does that mean that you'll never be creative ever again? No. Like I said, this is what it sounds like when it comes to self-image, music preferences. If you're going to be editing identity, right? And you're like, oh, I'm not the type of person who's like creative. You might be policing your 3 aesthetic dimensions quite heavily. However, the thing that's foundational to aesthetic dimensions are the musical dimensions, which are feeling, movement, rhythm, and then so there's melody, rhythm, lyrics, right? Edit the lyrics. I talked about, I can do this. I love learning. I'm creative as shit. Edit the lyrics, edit how you move. And when you move, you feel your muscles and your nervous system are linked. And then the last musical dimension is timbre, which is essence, right? Individual essence. The essence of individual freedom is choice, right? So if you want to edit the aesthetic dimensions, you're like, I'm not creative ever. Edit the musical dimensions first. And then that's foundational. And then you'll be able to fine tune the finer dimensions. You're not stuck in place. Capitalism has tied your hands. That's very much intentional. Because if they decrease mobility for you, whether it's upward in a business context or like actually making just everything inaccessible, then their status, their current position that they assume is fixed is not threatened because your hands are metaphorically tied and so are your feet. So edit the movement first. Okay, so they're talking about the brain is very effective at establishing patterns that form a sort of code, but inseparable from the great usefulness of a patterning system are certain limitations. In such a system, it is easy to combine patterns or to add them, but it is extremely difficult to restructure them, for the patterns control attention. So the thing is your brain is linked, everything is linked by association. However, that can be beneficial, when you're like, oh, I see this and now I'm running away. Men, you're cool sometimes. I don't know. It depends. But so like you're linking things by association and you might have a functional fixedness. However, if your identity is a bit more fluid, like you're open to suggestion, you're open to change, right? You've separated your work from your value. And the thing is that's a huge one because like if you, a lot of people only really concern themselves with work. If you can never be wrong and your work is tied to your value, and if you're saying your work is wrong, then that means you're wrong. And now they're talking to you like you're stupid. So have a more fluid understanding of the world. Don't have a binary interpretation of everything. It's not black versus white. Like it's not everyone is your competitor, right? When you have collaborators, you can still disagree, but very much build off of each other. And this is why like the arts are so important. I know I used to work in advertising, and usually every copywriter has an art director, right? And copy is language and art is like more visual. I mean, language is visual, but like we were often in conflict. However, we were on the same team and we wanted to pursue the same goal, okay? So very individualistic culture is not conducive to collaboration. Okay, so but again, they said insight and humor both involve the restructuring of patterns. Yes, so you have to know how to recombine things. I'm doing lateral learning. I'm literally weaving together information, and I'm using actual experts' information to weave it together. Nature is very much connected to human beings, right? Like DNA, chemistry, like there's chemistry everywhere. So you can weave it together. Just find your through line, or as I would say, your punch line, your silver lining. Thread that needle, catch that fly ball, right? The thing is we're talking about lateral learning, which involves connecting the right and left hemisphere, doing a figure 8, like I said last time, and that rests on the corpus callosum, right? And the corpus callosum, the skills that you're going to be able to perform well with a highly connected, brain is threading a needle, catching a ball, hand-eye coordination. So it's like literally sensory motor integration, being able to. This is why baseball and softball are the best sports for kids, I swear to God. Anywho, so yeah, insight and humor both involve the restructuring of patterns. Creativity also involves restructuring, but with more emphasis on an escape from restricting patterns, right? So, yeah, an escape is expression, right? And expression opposite to oppression. So if you want to express yourself and you're within an oppressive structure, the thing is we can't escape oppressive systems, as if we all could, then the system itself would not exist. However, you can dismantle the oppressive system in your mind, circling back all the way to decentering men, decentering patriarchy, decentering whiteness, decentering thinness, right? Those are all saying that these are right or wrong. If you date a man, you're right. If you're a skinny woman, you're right. If you're white, you're right, right? And so it's very binary. Again, like I talked about the aesthetic dimensions being policed. However, the thing is that's relative to society. That's all things that are objective, but however, also arbitrarily defined. Skin color. Thank you, white people, for just fucking everything up for everyone. But yes, so creativity is more emphasis on escape from restricting patterns. Lateral thinking involves restructuring, escape, and the provocation of new patterns. Yes, I'm provoking the scientific method, because the thing is the scientific method hasn't been updated in so goddamn long. Oh, it's periodically updated. It's not updated enough. I was also reading This Is What It Sounds Like, and they were talking about the invention of DAW, like when it comes to music recording, which is like digital, because originally everything was analog. And with an analog sort of, when they make records, right, there's life to it, because a logarithmic function, we're thinking abstractly, has the ability to decay, right? And so if there's something decays over time, like sound can decay, right? And that's going to indicate more life, right? However, when it comes to converting to digital, it's a linear function, right? So it's just a straight line. And the thing is this is why therapists all the time, love y'all, have to keep emphasizing that grief is not linear. Grief is not digital. It is not binary, black and white, low-level code manipulation. It's life has a lot of dimensions. Anywho, let's keep going. So lateral thinking is closely related to creativity, but whereas creativity is too often only the description of a result, lateral thinking is the description of a process. And so the thing is yes, oh my God, I love this. Actually, I'm gonna keep going. One can only admire a result, but one can learn to use a process. And I've described how to lateral learn. And there is about creativity a mystique of talent and intangibles, which is skill that is unseen. So again, how society really downplays the importance of lived experience. That is the dimension you're going to want to build out and be proud of, right? If they're like, no, you don't have any academic experience with this, I don't give a fuck. That's actually probably a good thing in this context, seeing as how I just read a neuroscience article describing, the structure of like being creativity, but like of what could it mean to be creative. However, you guys couldn't integrate your own math. And you just did the first process of integration, and creativity is inherently like integrative, right? Like it's incorporating new things. I swear to God, the sciences can't roll with a brand new, the sciences can't handle an update to the scientific method because they're always like, this is how it's always been done. Meanwhile, artists out here are just rolling with the punches, right? When they converted analog to digital, and that opened up a world of like possibility. Now you don't have to record in a studio. Now you can record at home, right? People are making their own songs, their own music now. When painters, the invention of photography, they were like, well, damn, we just perfected, but screw it. Photography is here and it's queer. No, it's photography is here, right? All the arts have constant innovation. And you know what artists do? They fucking roll with it. And the sciences, which is not really diverse, equitable, or inclusive at all. And also kind of, of course they're not innovating. They're not, they just measure everything through stats, and stats is so valid. However, stats is rooted in calculus, which is the fundamental study of change. You want to change the world, you're gonna have to integrate, which is going to be in calc, right? However, people are too afraid to touch calculus. Anywho, so more and more creativity is coming to be valued above knowledge and above technique, since both these are becoming so accessible. Knowledge and technique come together to be creative. Anyway, lateral thinking is concerned with the generation of new ideas. New ideas are the stuff of change, calculus, and progress in every field, from science to art, from politics to personal happiness. Lateral thinking is also concerned with breaking out of the concept prison of old ideas. Dismantle that prison in your mind. Kill the cop in your mind. This leads to changes in attitude and approach to looking in a different way at things, which have always been looked at in the same way. I've also read a book by a magician. He said that the people that are hardest to fool are children, because children approach the stage, they walk around the stage, they ask questions, they're inquisitive. And so what they're literally doing is getting a change in perspective. If you're just sitting in the front row and watching the performance and you're like in disbelief on how it's done, but then you don't move from your seat, you don't look at it from an angle, you just look at it straight on and you're like, I can't figure this out. Well, a lot of the technique you can view from the side. Get a change in perspective, okay? So then liberation from old ideas and the stimulation of new ones are twin aspects of lateral learning. Yeah, so functional fixedness, let go. I mean, the thing is you can also just be incredibly aware of, this is discernment, right? You can understand patterns, right? And it describes behavior, and you can be very aware of behavior, but you can also be incredibly creative. There are, anyone who does behavioral science or anything, they can also still be a part of the arts, because you can do multiple things. You can have complexity, right? You are a human being. You don't have to just be your job, and you don't have to think in this linear sequence, because oftentimes the linear sequence will not represent reality. Okay? So lateral thinking is quite distinct from vertical thinking, which is the traditional type of thinking, vertical, right? So I talk about the traditional school system. In vertical thinking, one moves forward by sequential steps of which must be justified, right? I'm going from pre-algebra to algebra and all this stuff. And the thing is that's so valid if you're this is your first time around. However, you don't really need to stick to it as an adult. If you get the gist, and then also you kind of just research where there's plot holes, or where there's holes in understanding, you can just construct it, right? You can go the long way around. It's also, I'm gonna keep going. The distinction between the two sorts of thinking is sharp. For instance, in lateral thinking, one uses information not for its own sake, but for its effect. In lateral thinking, one may have to be wrong at some stage in order to achieve a correct solution. In vertical thinking, logic or mathematics, this would be impossible. The thing is to get good at logic or mathematics, you do have to be wrong frequently. The thing is it depends on if you're building it. If you're building your vertical thinking with logic or mathematics, yeah, you're going to be wrong at certain points. The thing is the school system, again, when you're working on stuff, they pass fail, right? So it's I'm a failure. And so we often confuse who we are with what we value. And if we value work and our work is wrong, that means I'm a failure. I'm a failure. You're not a failure. The system is just so broken. You're not a failure. Trust me, you can keep learning. So lateral thinking is not a substitute for vertical thinking. Both are required. You can go forward, back, and then side to side. It's like looking ahead versus, having near versus far sight, and then looking left to right. It's just getting oriented with all angles around you. They are complementary. Lateral thinking is generative. Vertical thinking is selective. I also said I add a little thing called Sarah notes. However, I'm the only one reading these notes, so it's just a fun, it says Sarah note. Vertical and lateral are two distinct ways of moving or thinking. Vertical involves moving up or down a hierarchy, or a linear path, while lateral involves moving across or sideways, yes. So vertical, logical, step by step. Lateral is creative and indirect. So if you don't want to go the direct route, you can't go the direct route. There's obstacles in your way. You go the indirect route. Or as a golfer would say, you play it as it lies. You're dealt a hand that's just not ideal, and it's like, just hit it and let's keep it moving. But I know that there are different shots that are harder than the other. But so vertical versus lateral thinking and problem solving. Vertical is more logical, linear, and systematic. Lateral is creative, indirect, and flexible. And so vertical follows a step-by-step process requiring accuracy at each step. So it demands perfection. Lateral explores different angles and connections, not necessarily sequential. And then vertical is reaching a specific well-defined solution by working in depth. And then lateral is generating a wide range of new and innovative ideas by thinking outside the box. So I'm going to keep reading. This is going to be a bit of a longer episode, guys, but I hope you like it. The mind is a pattern-making system. The information system of the mind acts to create patterns and to recognize them. This behavior depends on the functional arrangement of the nerve cells in the brain. The most important property of the system is the ability to create its own patterns. Now, this is the thing where people, conspiracy theory, right? They're discussing patterns that are kind of not based in evidence. You can also use patterns that are pre-existing, right? Things that have been established in math or science. Or the thing is the arts, they're always but it doesn't have the arts have methods, right? Do you think that record producers are just selling records without any whiff of methodology or what sells? I have a book right here. All of the arts have methods. Anyway, so a system that can create its own patterns and recognize them is capable of efficient communication with the environment. It does not matter whether the patterns are right or wrong, so long as they are definite. And I added a little Sarah note, definite. So definite articles, nouns. It's a determiner that introduces a noun phrase and implies that the thing mentioned has already been mentioned or is common knowledge or is about to be defined. So then, when I was talking about, the reason why I added that is because I mentioned determiners earlier with dyscalculia, dyslexia. Actually, pause. There's something that I did forget. Sarah, this is all over the place. Welcome to Divergent Thinking. This is, in the book, this is what it sounds like. They talk about, so you can't split your attention. However, you can only switch. But the thing is your brain splits words and lyrics and then melody into two separate streams, and they're processed differently. And so in linguistics, I believe this is front channel versus back channel, where melody is prosody, right? Intonation, all this stuff. And so a lot of times people are how come they seem to only focus on the emotional content of what I'm saying? It's because they're focusing on the more salient dimension relative to them, where a lot of autistic people, they're was I not clear? I literally just said all of this straight out. You did. They're not focusing on the word/lyric dimension, which is could be considered the front channel. They're focused on the back channel, which is prosody, how you said it. I don't like your tone. What did you mean by that, right? And so the thing is I will extend grace to neurotypical people one time and one time only, because this does enter the conversation of, are you a lyric listener or a melody listener? I don't listen to lyrics. I only listen to melody. So I can understand where neurotypicals are coming from a little bit. However, it's okay. So yeah. So since the patterns are, so the mind, however, does not actively sort out information. The information sorts itself out and organizes itself into patterns. The mind is passive. The mind only provides an opportunity for the information to behave in the way. The mind provides a special environment in which information can become self-organizing. The special environment is a memory surface with special characteristics. So the abstraction definition, I just want to add this, is the process of removing something, especially water, from a river or other source. So let me tie this into what I'm saying. The mind is passive. The mind only works as an opportunity for the information to behave in a way. The mind provides a special environment in which information can become self-organizing. The special environment is a memory surface with special characteristics. So I'm going to define abstraction. The process of removing something, especially water, from a river or other source. So everything is linked by association. Please stay with me. Extracting something, especially from a river. So then we can talk about fluids. Information flow is the movement of information between individuals, systems, and processes. It's crucial for a variety of fields, business, computer science, and linguistics, for example. And so I'm going to show you how I get creative with it again. So in a business context, when we're talking about information flow, it refers to the exchange of data that supports operations, decision-makings, and collaboration. In a linguistics context, information flow, it tracks referential information in conversation. And then in computer science context, it can refer to the control of data transfer for security or analysis purposes. So we're talking about extracting information, like from the information flow, for three separate purposes. So I'm going to put it all together, right? We're going to rearrange this pattern. So when you're thinking abstractly, you're able to break apart and reassemble from the flow of information. The key elements being data that supports operation, decisions, and collaboration, function within society. 2, tracking referential information in conversation, self-relevance, which includes something that suggests linkage, direct, indirect, transition options. And then 3, and control of data transfer for security or analysis purposes, aka prefrontal cortex, which does executive functions, planning, decision-making, impulse control, and working memory. So what I just did, I just extracted what each of these 3 industries use the flow of information for, and I reassembled the parts to explain abstraction. So business, exchange of data that supports operations, decision-making, and collaboration, macro level, right? Linguistics context, tracks referential information in a conversation, interpersonal. Computer science context refers to the control of data transfer for security or analysis purposes, internal, right? And we could go micro, but I would say that interpersonal is probably micro, and then this is internal. So anyway, external, interpersonal, internal. What do you need to index abstract thought? Label. Internal, external relationship to self, and social context. I'm describing abstraction using an abstraction with 3 separate industries and then plugging it back into how your brain indexes abstract thought. So memory. Cool. Let's keep going. It's just reassembling the parts, knowing what does fit where. So we do have business, outside, production, expression, yeah. So the macro and the micro crossing over at your reference point. So like I was talking about, hold on to the idea of business. Hold on to the idea of computer science. Business, external, right? Collaboration between 2 separate businesses. So, and then computer science is security and analysis from within the company, right? So the macro and the micro crossing over at your reference point. Both the data sciences and business use linguistics, okay? So it crosses over at linguistics, and it's an endless process, aka the infinity symbol, the mathematical concept for a quantity without bounds, or an endless process, aka imagination, creativity, learning, growing, changing, evolving. Someone was going to be like, Sarah just said that, it connected as an infinity. I understand the math behind infinity. I understand calculus. I'm not being like, it's an infinity symbol, and now you cut to me being Charlie Day in front of like the unrelated things. Let me repeat myself. The macro and the micro crossing over at your reference points, right? An endless process, aka the infinity symbol, the mathematical concept for a quantity without bounds or an endless process. Imagination, creativity, learning, growing, changing, evolving. What were we evolved to do? Evolve to evolve. Neurogenesis, okay? So life is creativity through time. Creativity is infinite. Life is a time-dependent process or problem. What's the difference between a process and a problem? Outlook. Okay, so it's a problem if you're looking for a situation that requires a solution, solve for the meaning of life. Life is going to be a problem. Like if you're like, what's the answer to this? So, and then problem, right, is something where it's like, oh, it's kind of a burden. You got to figure it out. It's heavy. And then a process is the set of steps to achieve a goal. If the goal of life is to just keep on living, creating, evolving, then by golly, you've actually figured it out. It's continuous. Just keep it moving. What's the goal? Keep learning, growing, evolving, do creative shit, fun shit, work in the meantime. Anyway. So problems can stem from a lack of process, which is a process problem, or lack of logic steps and patterns relative to you. But also human factors like communication or commitment can be a problem, but that's a people problem. So when you're trying to figure out life, try to make sure, do I have a process problem? Like I don't know the actual steps, or do I have a people problem? And you're like, I have both, and I relate. I relate. So all these different bends in the process will give you a different shape, right? And the shape of the information could fill in some gaps in understanding or just make new connections between concepts in your brain. Like when a puzzle piece can fit into a spot it shouldn't go into. And even though the image doesn't line up, the underlying structure of the piece does. And if you're type A, you might want to make the image like might want to make the puzzle the exact image on the box, you know. Or if you're just like, I want to make the image on the box and then I'll leave it, right? But if you're daring, if you're bold, you reject the image, you know, correct relative to society, and you keep reconfiguring, recombining pieces until at the very end you've made an image unlike the one on the box. It's all the same pieces, just maybe reassembled into a phoenix. Or maybe still a square, but now it's a cubist expressionist piece instead of a man fishing on a lake, right? So just recombining the puzzle pieces to make an image that you'd like to make, right? We all don't have to be just doing the puzzle, following the sequential steps, and then we're like, oh, wow, we're left with a man fishing on a lake. Well, that's so valid. Sometimes, you know, if you're more creative, you're like, some of these pieces do fit with some other pieces, right? And it's just a matter of reconfiguring it or moving around the parts. And now, once you're done with this puzzle, it looks nothing like the box. You have the same pieces. However, you've made like an actual, like, you know, it looks like a giraffe shape. Yeah, it's more jagged at the neck, but okay. Just don't look too hard, you know? So again, you're literally taking shape, right? You seek out information, grab onto it, mold it how you see fit, and display it or use it somewhere you see fit, right? You're taking shape. You're molding yourself. Your default mode network, which houses your music preferences, also molds self-image, self-concept, right? And so there's 7 dimensions. There's aesthetic dimensions. There's musical dimensions, which are gross, fine motor skills. You can adjust all of them, and it shapes self-image. Image is a shape, right? And you're molding yourself to how you want to be, right? A lot of people are told straight up, you need to be straight. You need to fuck a man and then have a baby and married and pregnant by the time you're 25 and then just pop out kids. And if you've done that, that's all fine and well. But the more you deviate from the path, it's going to get unfamiliar. It's going to get scary. It's going to get new. But then you also have to realize this is not the first time anyone's deviated from the social script. There are so many other cultures and subcultures way ahead of you. If you're like, oh gosh, I'm not going to be accepted by the dominant culture, like what else is out there? Everyone else who just rejected the dominant culture. You're not on the fixed track anymore, you know, like track and field sort of understanding. However, you are on a very well-worn dirt path or path through the woods. You can't be totally you're not really a trailblazer. So and this is not to be like you're not the first. I'm saying in a good way. You're not the first. There are people much farther ahead, and so it's not like you're going in and there's like no next steps or anyone to look to. You just have to change your direction, change your perspective, and then kind of make your way through the woods. I mean, you can deviate from the path. It's just going to require a lot more toughness, grit, resilience, and that's everyone who's ever gone through some hard shit in their life. You've gone to a therapist. They're like, you're very resilient, you're very gritty. And then I just imagine us like we just went off the trail for days and we were finally found by a search team and we're like, thank you. But also I wish I hadn't done that. So just, I mean, you can deviate from the well-worn path. Just know that you're going to have to be forward tough. And this is why you're going to want to develop the motor skills. The fine motor skills, it could get you through the woods, but the gross motor skills, you'll be able to step up and, okay. Yeah. These are analogies, similes, metaphors, associations, creative thinking, abstractions, reassembling the pattern. I'm doing it right now, applying it. Okay. So, let's keep going. I did add a little part, but I don't think anyone wants this. If you want to get into the physics of it, because I did give a business linguistics and computer science analogy, they are describing heat diffusion on a finite domain. I think it's like solved using numerical methods to approximate the heat equation, a partial differential equation. Anyway, then there's more to it. Anywho, so then the finite element method, FEM, is a numerical technique that approximates the solution to complex problems like those described by partial differential equations by dividing a continuous domain into a finite number of smaller, simpler elements. It can be used in stress analysis, fluid dynamics, and heat transfer. Stress analysis, like strain. Fluid is like movement through a fluid. And then heat transfer, like energy can either be created nor destroyed, only transferred or transformed. So anywho, there's physics to it. Sarah, how'd you break that down? Because everything is linked by association. If you listen to what people are actually saying, you actively process it, you can understand it. Okay. Everything, like I just said, is linked by association. If you can take it up and down, levels of abstraction, associate up and down as well as across, which requires two pivots, you got yourself creativity, the essence, spirit, timbre, conjuring of life. This is aha moments, right? There was the book, The Art and Science, the art and craft of doing science, right? They always talk about the scientific method, but what comes before the scientific method? The hypothesis, the wondering, your mind wandering, you're imagining all the possible creation solutions. And so this is the inspo moment, the creative moment. And then it's kind of interesting when you come up with a hypothesis, you have a creative inspiration and then you're working backwards. So, I mean, but let's not apply that to the actual scientific method. Or like, let's not listen to artists, even though hypothesis is creative inspiration. I wonder if this is like this, right? And then you work backwards. But no. Let's not apply that to everything else. The arts and then working backwards. So yes, this is just me now getting into how much I love this article, and you guys should read it. I wrote down on this paper, I'm actually going to shit myself with this line. Humor and insight. As with the plastic pieces, they're talking about reconfiguring a puzzle, right? There is often an alternative way of arranging available information. This means that there could be a switchover to another arrangement. Usually this switchover is sudden. If the switchover is temporary, it gives rise to humor. If the switchover is permanent, it gives rise to insight. It is interesting that the reaction to an insight solution is often laughter, or even when there is nothing funny about the solution itself. I had not read this at this point, but I literally said, what is comedy but coming up with a hypothesis and then like being like, why is this like this? Has anyone ever wondered why your mom is so okay with doing this? You're creating this like hypothesis, right? However, the hypothesis, since it's humorous, right, it's temporary. Okay, this is important. Humor is temporary. Insight is permanent. So when it comes to watching drag, if you've ever heard a drag queen talk, they say, to immerse yourself in the performance, you need to suspend disbelief, right? And so suspending beliefs so you can immerse yourself in the performance, the flow of how everything is going. So what that means for a lot of people, you cannot suspend beliefs. It's going to be very hard if you think that your worth is tied to your work, right? So, or like you think that the scientific method or, vertical learning is the only valid way, right? That's a fixed path, association, assumption, right? So if it's fixed, it's harder to suspend. Because it's attached to yourself. You're like, but this is my value. If I suspend disbelief or if I suspend beliefs, then wait, who am I without it? Well, who you are without it is enjoying a drag show. It's enjoying and immersing yourself in something creative. So, yes. Humor, right? I talked about how a lot of people don't take humor seriously, even though you have to be smart to be funny, consistently funny. So it's like a hypothesis that's like, hey guys, you ever thought about this and this? And you humor someone, right? Someone proposes an idea, like jokes can be tendentious, non-tendentious, tendentious being often trying to convince people of your often controversial opinion. Like it's like a hypothesis, right? And it's controversial. So people understanding the context of humor and comedy, they're like, I'll allow it momentarily, but they're not accepting it as truth. I mean, if you joke about something long enough with a group of people, then yes, you will. And that's the alt-right pipeline. But in these one-off scenarios, when you're in a comedy humorous context and you're hearing something and you know that it's not scientifically correct, right? Or it's like they're missing a step. However, it was funny, right? They're comparing two things that are otherwise dissimilar, right? They're abstracting the gist of two things and they're mashing it up, and the contrast, the misdirection of it is humorous, right? You're like, oh my gosh, those are kind of analogous. However, I would have never paired those things together, right? And if a lot of humor could be controversial, it also can be clean. However, you're accepting it temporarily. You're like, ha 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 ha. That's so funny. But we also must consider the implications, right? So like you have a moment of just like accepting it. So moving beyond that, humor is insight, right? Where it's more permanent. So someone's proposing something and you're accepting it in a solid way. You're right. You're embodying it. And so if you'll notice, what's involved with that is movement, right? So humor moves the muscles a little bit. However, when you accept something, you feel conviction in it. You feel stable in it, right? It's like it's firm, right? It's you stand strong in the information, and it's more embodied, right? Especially if you're learning by doing, right? Because you have the cognitive and the body elements coming together, and then that is how you get synchronicity, understanding, harmony, right? When mind and body align, understanding aligns, it's synced, right? I described, if you guys have ever said, Sarah, you made something click for me, you're describing synchronicity. The thing is a lot of people need help explaining their feelings, movements, feelings, sensations. And so that's all going to be mainly in the body. I mean, there's senses in the face and head, obviously, but like a lot of people aren't aware of their body movements because society does cut off movement, right? They tell you, oh, you can't be this, or you can't do this, or you can't move up, or you definitely can't transfer jobs, or stop quiet quitting. So you're literally confined in place. And when you sit in place for a long time and you're not activating muscles or moving in any sort of way, whether even just be looking left to right, you're not feeling much, right? So I'm just making people aware of things. And when I make you aware of things, I make you aware of your body. And now I make you aware of your body, and I give you a concept. I give you the grounded reality. I give you the concept, and now the concept is grounded. And yeah, that's an insight. Aha, right? Aha. Anywho, let's keep going. So insight is the relief of clarity, but the weight of knowing, which is describing acceptance, right? You're accepting something. You're accepting this understanding. The relief of clarity, but the weight of knowing. So the weight, depending on your outlook on things, Acceptance is both happiness and sadness at the same time. The genuine catharsis of putting two things together, but also the new weight of embodied understanding, because it's grounded in your body, right? And so you're kind of held in place. You're like, oh my God, I accept something. Oh yeah. And then you move on, right? Because life is progression of time. So the easier you like learn and you're creative and you're understanding things and you collaborate with people, you improv, you yes and, right? You don't know but. You're not a contrarian. It's not black or white. You don't compare yourself to other people. You compare concepts, right? Or you compare understanding to see where there's a gap in knowledge, and then you guys work to fill in that gap, right? Add a third dimension to it, the gap being depth, okay? You fill it in. So humor lies, but okay, so actually I was going to do into this. Humor lies, but insight is the truth. And lie has such a negative connotation, but like there's different types of lies. But it's just like a white lie, right? Like Sarah has said with conviction, Sarah has the vacant stare of a mule is a lie, right? Because it's like, it's not an exact 1-to-1. However, it's a funny little lie, right? It's like, I could see that. I'll humor it, right? I accept that. We're moving on. She's not actually a mule. She is not actually infertile as well. That is the secondary burn to a mule insult. I'm a prey animal that's infertile. But no, keep going. See, that's when you take a joke too seriously and now you're like, that's not fun. But so humor is continuous, insight is permanent. So like I said, play it where it lies. You're given this the hand that you're dealt, and you're like, wow, this is just not ideal. But do some card counting. Don't be afraid to cheat the system, especially because the system is cheating everyone. The person most likely to cheat in any sort of card game is always the dealer. So if you're like, oh, I can't cheat at poker or blackjack or anything, the system is the one most likely to cheat. The system that's controlling. I mean, as long as it's not at the expense of other people and it's at the expense of the system, go for it. Yes. But yeah. This is my discussion. Sorry, that was such a soft conclusion. But yes, that is abstraction, improvisation. It's just rearranging things, being open to just being flexible, like more open to like a discussion, right? If you can tell when someone genuinely wants to collaborate with you. Because contrarians are so out in the obvious now, right? Like they're always like, you'll say the sky is blue, and I can see where you'd think that. It's like they can't validate you. Validation is like saying something is true, so they're trying to like disprove, and disprove is a no but, right? There's now a restriction, a constraint, and so it's like, I don't want to riff with you. But I'm going to get into fun little improv games for what? Collaboration. Let me take a little drink of Celsius. So, here are some great improv games to work on collaboration skills. So there's word at a time story. Students sit in a circle, give them a title for a story like the best birthday ever. The story is told one word at a time around the circle. Remind students that the story has to make sense. They are building sentences, not throwing in funny words to try and get a laugh. This is something that pisses me off in improv. When there's always someone who's like, penis, I want to like stand up with a bow and arrow, shoot them in the chest, and then face the stage, you know what I mean? And be like, shut up. It's such a cheap shot. And if you're going to throw out cheap shots like a penis joke, I will hit you with a bow and arrow from 3 feet away in this black box theater. Okay? So everyone has to work together to remember where they've been and try to create a cohesive thought. There's also a family portrait. Divide the class into groups. Each group comes up one at a time and is given a title for a picture that revolves around a type of family. Family of dentists, family of cheerleaders, family of lost librarians. You can even make it more specific. Groups have 10 seconds to form a portrait based on the title. Remind students to think about the characters involved in the picture and to talk to each other so that there are no repeat characters. Oh my God. I've done this just like... when I was filming more comedy videos, I loved the idea. Oh my God, I actually made a full series pitch for this. This is somewhere on my computer, of a family of dentists in Hilton Head, South Carolina. It has Walton Goggins and Amy Sedaris, because they both have incredibly nice teeth, and they're both like they're both dentists. And this is my pilot episode. This is actually wild that they recommend this one. But basically the concept is that they're like highly sexual dentists, not like towards staff or like anyone, like a patient. They're just like, they started a dentistry. They started a dentist business together, right? Walton Goggins will like be working on someone's teeth, or Amy Sedaris will be working on someone's teeth, and then from behind, like Walton will come up behind Amy and like kind of like help her work on the teeth, similar to that pottery scene in Ghost. However, it's just them like working, like cleaning someone's cavities out, and then Amy will turn around and Walton will be like smiling his big pearly whites, and like, there's it's kind of like dark, the lights have dimmed, and they'll start like making out. Meanwhile, there's this 50-year-old man on the table, mouth wide open, being like, "Oh yeah, what's going on? What's going on?" And so I just thought, I have a whole pilot written out for that. So this is so interesting. They talked about dentists. It never came to fruition because I didn't send it anywhere because it got really sexual immediately. So foreign film dub, this is another game. A scene for a group of 4. 2 players act out a scene in gibberish. The second 2 players are their English language dubbers. They translate the scene into English. Tips for the scene: those using gibberish should use a lot of physical action to give clues to their translator counterparts. Also keep the sentences short. Remember, the goal here is a cohesive scene. You have to work together as a team to make the best scene possible. Once the scene is complete, switch roles. So this is this type of game where you should be animated when you're speaking, right? So people can dub it and kind of assume what you're saying in like a funny way. This is the complete opposite of the nonchalance epidemic of it all, right? Where like if you express yourself or move your face or have any intonation, or then it's like, so you want to seem cool, calm, and removed, right? That's what nonchalance will communicate. And if you're naturally nonchalant, that's so valid. But as a method to attract, it doesn't make a lick of sense. So, expression, movement, is a way to collaborate or connect with another. So this is how you can use improv and creativity to further your romantic life. There's also same circle. Everyone stands in a circle. Person A makes a small gesture. The person beside them repeats the gesture, and so on around the circle. The point of the exercise is to keep the gesture exactly the same. Everyone has to concentrate and pay attention to the gesture. It's not supposed to be bigger or change hands or twist. It must be repeated exactly. Harder to do than you think it is. You can do the same exercise with sounds. And I know for damn sure, because everyone's immature as hell, my gesture would be jacking off, playing with my nipples. You know what? That's fine. But this is talking about, okay, that just got muddy waters. But I mean, like in an adult setting. Oh, fun fact. When a bunch of guys, well, we all know this. When a bunch of guys jerk each other off in a circle, it's a circle jerk, yeah. But when a bunch of girls do it, it's a daisy chain. So you just all sit in a circle and, anyway, so there's a bunch of games that I'm going to recommend for collaboration, right? Team building exercise, creative sort of improv. You don't have to do actual improv. You could do jazz improv. A lot of you are musicians. You could also just go out and explore different areas of learning and creativity and arts. And again, when I critique the sciences or the scientific method, does not mean I think science is dull, boring, stupid, antiquated. I think the methodology is a bit antiquated and a bit counterproductive, but sometimes. But I'm very much in love with the sciences. Anywho, this has been How to Be More Creative. I went through all the steps, and then I did a little funny improv thing at the end. I guess I didn't really like improv. However, I did tell you guys about my funny sort of musings. Don't be afraid to get weird. If you're like, oh, it's embarrassing. Embarrassing is just an acute sense of sadness due to a violation of a social norm. So the thing is to be creative, to be divergent, to be different, to express yourself in the way that you want to. You're going to have to violate some social norms. So embarrassment doesn't last long. The reason why it's so potent, though, is because it has an element of surprise, since it's an acute sense of sadness, right? That means surprise and sadness. However, on the flip side is delight, whereas sadness and happiness. And it's like a pleasant experience, learning and growing experience. Anywho, thank you all so much for listening to this. This has been Shower Thoughts. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Make sure to rate me 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any place you get your podcasts. And I will talk to you guys next week. This has been so much fun. Bye.